right, welcome back to the Heart2Hartley Podcast. I'm Adam Dragoon. I'm here with Mr. Albert Hartley. Say hello.
Hello, everyone.
And we are back for part 2 of the Heart2Hartley Podcast, episode 2. And today we want to enter into a discussion about communication, a topic that is unendingly important for so many areas of life. Marriage would be one of them. Keeping a job, getting a job.
Marriage is, I wasn't thinking of that one, but you're right. That's important. Maybe that's my problem.
Well, you can't have any kind of marriage or friendship or relationship with anyone without good communication. So I'm just going to give the ball to you, Mr. Hartley, and you can take it and go wherever you like. What is important about communication?
Well, Adam, thanks for being here with me today, and I appreciate your time. I will tell the audience, Adam doesn't know anything about what I'm going to talk about, so he requested some notes, and I did not send them to him, so he's being very nice. However, I do want to talk about the distinction between informing someone and communicating with someone, and there's a distinction. And let me just go back a little bit. The reason that I spend so much time with communication, and I assume if you spoke to my wife, she'd probably tell you I'm not a very good communicator, like most wives do probably to their husbands. Part of that is probably because I expect her to understand when I'm not communicating verbally, but that's not always fair to her. So one of the things I would like to discuss on the podcast is, what is the purpose of communication? What are you trying to do? And the overarching principle that I like to talk about is the distinction between informing somebody and communicating with somebody.
Okay.
So we have a real problem in our culture because we have all these different ways of communicating. For example, one of the dreaded things that I cannot stand now, and that's happening, and it could be because I'm getting older, but it's texting.
Yes.
Okay. Then we have tweeting. Then we have something my daughter does, Snapchat.
Uh-huh.
Yes, I don't even understand what that is. Then we have something called Instagram, and then my wife and everybody's into Pinterest, and there's all these ways of connecting without connecting.
Yep.
And text is a form of communication. I'm going to date myself here, and you understand this. Those are pagers as far as I'm concerned.
I had a pager. I dated my wife in the era of pagers.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So, well, and most of the drug dealers at my high school used pagers. So they banned those when I was in school. The pagers, for those of you who don't know what they are, basically you would just type in a number and it would buzz and you'd see it. And it's basically a form of text messaging. And they developed into longer messages, and then you got into this. So now you have this text. And so when I'm training a new employee or I'm talking to somebody about the ways of communicating to people, I always want to make the distinction between informing someone and communicating with somebody.
Mm-hmm.
Because a lot of times those things get confused. Communication has multiple levels, right? You have your body language. You have your tone, your inflection. You have your facial reactions. So those are all part of communicating. Because I can say the same thing out of someone's presence and then say the exact same thing with a different meaning in someone's presence because they're picking up my body language. So we're always communicating something. The distinction between informing someone is usually fact-based. So one of the things I teach is that you can't communicate with somebody via text message. You can inform them. You can develop strategies for time and maybe meet, but communication means that you are understanding someone's intention.
Mm-hmm.
That's an important distinction that people should realize in the audience, that a lot of times we're not communicating intentions anymore because I'll shoot you a text or I'll send you this or I'll send you an email. Well, those mediums are not the best way to communicate. So let's talk about a couple overarching principles. All right, let's define information.
Okay.
If I'm asking you to be at a restaurant at 7:15, I don't need to have a long communication with you. I can send you a text and say, restaurant, Olive Garden, 7:15, Greenbrier.
Good choice.
Right. Boom. That's it. I'm informing you of something. If I communicate to you, what would you like to eat? Well, now we're going into somewhere, right? Because someone could say, well, I want Italian or this, and we're getting somewhere, right? I don't really know if you're asking me that question because you want to really know what I think, or if you're just being polite, and then I go back and say, And this is what happens in my house. If my wife texts me and says, what would you like to eat? And I'm like, oh, the text, let's go here. I really don't want to go there. Okay, well, now we're back down a rabbit hole here, right?
Right.
So if I call her on the phone and I say, hey, want to go to Olive Garden? And she says, well, okay, the hesitation and the hum immediately indicates resistance. So I don't have to really worry about the text. She could not want to go to Olive Garden, but text me, okay, and I'm concerned. I think she's confirming that information.
Right.
And in reality, she's not confirming it. She's just giving into it. She's submitting to it. That type of submission is not always heartfelt. And that can be in anything. So if you talk about a business transaction where someone is trying to communicate to you a contract term, a lot of people start using text messages to communicate terms of an agreement, which is a huge mistake. Because what if there's not a meeting of the minds between those parties? The information might be accurate, right? But the intention could be completely different. So when you've started doing this process of, am I giving information, am I communicating, there's some lessons that I try to teach around that. Okay, so Adam, does that make sense about the distinction I'm making?
It absolutely does, yes.
Now, this is important in a couple different settings. Business, we'll talk about that in a second, but I want to talk about relationships. Kids nowadays, they love to, and that sounds old, doesn't it? Kids nowadays, I feel like I'm walking uphill two ways.
Yes, Grandma.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, let me just say this. A younger generation who's more digital minded, okay? There was a time when you would call someone on the phone and say, hey, call me back, let's talk. There are kids now who they don't talk to each other at all.
No.
They just text each other. Now, my own philosophical issues with that is I think there's a lack of connectivity between those parties. Because I'm not sure they're communicating emotion, feeling. It seems static to me somewhat. Almost like, and you can hide behind the text. You don't have to really own your information. I've watched kids sort of get off the information quickly, like, I got to go, boom. So there's not this sense of where am I sitting with you? Where am I? I'm on the same page with you. There's a lot of hiding, I think, now that happens in relationships. I think it also has carried itself over into adulthood where, you know, if my wife and I, for example, if we're communicating to each other, we're talking to each other, my wife's not a very verbal communicator, okay? She doesn't like to talk as quickly as I do. I verbally communicate pretty decently. She gets overwhelmed with that. So sometimes I'll say to her, can you email me what your thoughts are about this? And my wife's a beautiful writer.
Yeah.
And it's fascinating to me, like, you know, we've been together a long time, but the person who writes those emails, there's such a revelation to me about the person who she really is, her intellect, her wit, her communication skills, her ability to convey herself. In an email, it's so much more powerful than in person.
That's interesting.
So when I read the email, I always sit back and think, wow, man, that's so powerful, because I would never have obtained that information talking to her. And I'm not sure if it's because she's more careful or if she's more analytical. Whatever it is, when we're not able to connect, I typically say, can you just email me that information so I can really, and I'm able to respond to that personally before I email her, right? There's some time lag. The text is immediate.
Yep.
What's that supposed to mean? Why are you saying that? What's wrong with you? Da, da, da. So these are not places of information and communication where they clash. In business, it's really important to understand the distinction there. So if you're giving someone bad news, one of the lessons I teach is when you're giving someone bad news, you never inform them of that. You talk to them. You communicate to them. You don't send them a message or an email that says, here, Merry Christmas, you got some bad news.
Yeah.
Because what ends up happening is that the communication's lost. The information is not lost, but the context is lost. The intention is lost. And so I really think the intentions of people's communication is extremely important. So if I need to know where I'm going, what time, that's information.
Right.
Don't call me and say, hey, Al, call me back. I don't need that. Like, I don't need to call you back and say, hey, Al, I was going to call you and let you know we're going to meet here at 5 o'clock. Really? You can't shoot me an email on that? You can't, Al, 5 o'clock, McDonald's or whatever.
Yeah.
Wow. No, I want to communicate. No, don't communicate that. Hey, Al, I hit your dog with a car. Well, that's something I should talk to you on the phone about. Do not email me bad news.
Yes. People are very confused about this.
Yeah, and let's layer that. Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
Facebook posts.
Yeah.
It's a disaster.
Yeah.
I mean, how many of us read those and go, they just put that up there? Like, ooh, please remove it, right?
I tell you what, I've run into families that have split up over Facebook posts.
Oh yeah, mine. No, I'm joking. We haven't, but we don't. A lot of it. My family doesn't use Facebook for those types of things. Just interesting stuff.
Sure.
But there's a new channel of communication that didn't exist back in the 80s and 90s. I mean, look at how many different places now you can communicate information.
Mm-hmm.
Here's the other thing. It also puts the person who's receiving the information in an awkward situation. Is that about me?
Right.
Was that post about my circumstance? So it's what I call unilateral conversations, which are really bad because that means you're just having it with yourself. So one of the funny things I tell my wife is, I don't know why you're asking me since you already know the answer, I guess. So why are we talking about it? And she's like, oh, be quiet. I'm like, well, you know me well enough to know the answer. She's basically being courteous.
Right.
She doesn't really want me to respond to it. So if we add a couple of things to that, let's think about business and how often now the speed of business creates conflict for people. I have a perfect example of this. I do a lot of real estate settlements. And so one of my real estate agents put on a Facebook post, I would never do a closing with Albert Hartley.
Oh, really?
Okay. Now, I have known this realtor for 15 years. People started to text me and email me and say, what did you do to so-and-so? So this lady, as sweet as she could be, she wanted to type without.
3 little letters changed the whole thing.
3 little letters. And she was mortified. So I had a staff member call her because I didn't want her to be embarrassed. She's like, oh, no, I don't think that's what I meant to say. And then she had to, it was a mess. These things didn't happen when you wrote a letter.
No.
You had 3 days and you had to take some time. It's that whole Mark Twain quote, if I had more time, I'd write you a short letter.
Yeah.
Okay. So the point I'm making is let's talk about in business. Okay. In business, you're trying to make sure that the person you're talking to, understands your intention. Informing them is a dominant situation.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Because what you're doing is you're not asking for their feedback. They have one choice to make. Receive it or reject it. That's it.
Right.
Communication says, hey, I'm opening us up to dialogue for you to participate with me, and I'm interested in what you have to say back. If I'm informing you, there are no participation points given. There are, I'm providing you information. You can take it or leave it. I'm dominating the dynamic.
Sure.
So it's really important if you're providing information or communication to know which one you're trying to do.
Because there are places for both.
There are, absolutely. Yeah. I'm not talking about not being polite. I'm not talking about being civil or courteous. I'm talking about the receiver of the communication and the receiver of the information. Their perception of your intention is crucial in a complex communicating world. So it's important that the person providing that information understands what they're trying to do. The purpose of this talk or the purpose of this transfer of data, right? If I'm trying to inform you, I don't want your feedback, okay? If I'm trying to communicate with you, your reaction to my information is crucial. Therefore, my inflection, my tone, my facial, my introductions, my conclusions are crucial versus meet me at Olive Garden at 7:00.
Right.
I don't need to say, hey, how you doing? Or what's it like? No, meet me at Olive Garden 7:00. 7:00 on RG. There you go. You don't need any more than that. Okay. And I think this is a really important topic for people to really start analyzing their sense of how they're providing data to other folks. Are they providing information through a communication means, which means it's getting clouded with emotion and some other information? Are they providing information in a less clear sense because they're trying to be inefficient with their communication, right? Instead of just informing someone, they're like, please call me back.
Yeah.
No, don't call me back. Or, hey, and so those are the types of things I think are really important. And as we go through some of these other techniques that we talk about in order to clarify those things on other podcasts, hopefully the next one, which we'll talk about, is how to best communicate in a very data-rich world.
Okay. So, yeah, maybe I could ask your opinion about something. I picked up a communication technique. And
that sounds scary,
especially when you're trying to tell someone something that is sensitive, whether it's negative or whether you're not sure what kind of feedback they're going to give you. So I learned something called a position permission statement. Have you ever heard of that?
Yes, I have heard of that. Go ahead, explain it.
Okay, a position permission statement. So that it's a tool to help me communicate more clearly what I want to say. So the first thing to do is ask your permission. Would it be to state your position. Position is first. So in order to understand this situation more clearly, then you ask permission. Would it be all right for me to share with you some information? So, for example, if my wife is wearing a dress that maybe I don't like or something like that.
That would never happen.
I
understand.
Yes.
Right, I understand.
You get what I'm saying. But that is potentially a situation that could blow up in my face if I don't treat it right. Okay. So first of all, I state my position. Because I am concerned about the dinner party we're about to go to, would it be all right if I shared some information about what you're wearing? And so that's kind of a weird example.
Well, no, what you're doing is creating what I call psychological space. Mm-hmm. You're trying to create a zone where we can have a conversation, something that doesn't become personal and hurtful.
Sure. Yeah. And to me, I've used this in 1,000 situations, and it always works well because it gives someone the opportunity to say, no, I don't want to hear that right now. And that's okay. And if they say no, that's fine. I walk away.
Well, I talk to people every day about tough situations. And one of the things that I've developed over the years is to ask them, are you prepared to hear what I have to say? Mm-hmm. And they'll look at me sometimes and say, well, what do you mean by that? And I say, well, are you ready to hear what I consider to be objective information, which may be upsetting to you? If you're not ready for that, we can save that for later.
Yeah.
And what that does is it creates a third, like sort of this third party thing that's out there. And it's not about me and the other person anymore. It's like, do you really want to talk about or want me to describe that situation for you?
Yeah.
One thing I would tell you about the position thing is that it almost assumes some bad information's coming.
Right.
Okay. Where I think a more unique way of doing that is to say, listen, what do you want from me in this response? What are you looking for? Okay. That's like the preposition.
Okay.
And you say, well, what are you looking for? And if the person says, I think this is the greatest dress ever. I look really great in this dress. And they say, I want you just to confirm that for me. Okay.
Yeah.
I can do that. I confirm if that's what you feel, and I'm confirming you.
Yeah.
Okay. So when you ask what they're looking for, because I tend to be a problem solver, probably like you, there's a lot of times I miss the sensitivity of listening. Mm-hmm. Because you can see my brow is probably furrowed now. I don't understand why we would even have a conversation about me listening without you wanting my input, because clearly you've missed that dress situation. The light was bad and you picked something bad.
Right.
I mean, that doesn't change that I don't love you or that you're not good looking, but that's a bad decision.
Yes.
I would hope you would tell me the same. But that's not always the case for people who want to talk to you. Right?
Yeah.
And that sort of level of restraint in communication is what I think is lost now in the 21st century, because we can hide behind the mediums.
Yeah. It's so easy to publish yourself.
Yeah, and really nobody should. I mean, it's I don't really need to know everyone's opinion. And here's the funny part about that. That's really there's no risk there. Mm-hmm. When you are risking the truth by telling someone the truth face to face, you're risking the reaction. Mm-hmm. If I put something on blast on Facebook, well, I don't have anybody really contacting me. No. Even so, for example, you may want to email that dress conversation in. Right? Right? You may want to say, hey, honey, listen, I'm going to answer that to you in a text from the car when I meet you at church.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very good. I think it's so powerful because I think people tend to put things on social media that they would never say in a conversation face to face. They would never say those things.
Right. And well, maybe some of us would say them, but that means we don't have a lot of friends. But I think there's a travesty in our culture where we don't know where we stand anymore. I mean, if you read some of the old letters from 1785 and some of the colonial days, there was this subtle way of communicating that was two levels, right? It was up here, we're going to be socially appropriate, and then there's letters sent like, okay, here's the information you need to understand, okay? Those social cues are missed now because nobody has those connections in a public setting. And it's almost unfair when people, because sort of this idea of rudeness doesn't exist anymore because everyone's on their phone, okay? So one of the things I think it's neat about when I'm with my friends, we'll ask permission. Is this a day with phones or without phones? Are we checking business or are we just connecting to be present? I like that idea.
Yeah.
Right? And we say, well, and one of them may say, look, I'd like some permission to check this. I'm waiting for an email. It's really important. I'd like some permission to check my phone until I get that email. Okay, then you're participating now. You're not dominating the conversation. But there's nothing worse than sitting at a table with somebody and they're on their phone. And you're like, okay, what is going on with you that you can't present yourself in the moment to communicate?
Yeah.
Right?
That's really important.
Yeah, it's really important. And also, I think it affects your ability to communicate with human beings. Because I think it detaches you from them. And ultimately, and this is going to sound lofty and maybe overstated. Oh, I tend to think I'd be melodramatic. But I think it has reduced our ability to be compassionate for people.
Certainly.
Because I think you're able to hide behind the technology. Whereas if you're together and you're listening to people, and I think one of the things we should talk about next is listening, which is sort of the other side of the coin to communicating. You cannot communicate without listening.
Yeah.
So, and I don't think it's trained. People don't train. I mean, the kids are all on their phones. They have their phones at school. They're able to text. This is not communication. I mean, if you've seen a teenager's texting string, clearly it's not high and lofty educational banter. So I'm wondering if that's degraded us a little bit as a people and as citizens, to where we're missing some connectivity, which creates ultimately conflict, I think.
Okay. Bottom line then, for the person who's listening to this, they want to get better at communication. What is your advice to them?
Well, the first thing they should do is start making the distinction between what is information and what is communication. And once they start identifying that data I'm trying to connect with someone is information, and that data is something I should communicate, once they start putting those distinctions together, then they can choose the appropriate medium. And I think what they'll see is they're better connected with people, they're less ambiguous in their communication, and their predictability in their relationships is going to increase significantly.
That's fantastic. So this second episode of Heart2Hartley Podcast will certainly help you in whatever relationship you might have. And so maybe in your marriage, maybe in your workplace, we hope that you can use some of these tools. And so we're going to leave it right there. Any last words, Mr. Hartley?
No, just don't text me.
All right. And with that, we hope that you come back for episode 3. And so stick around for a Heart2Hartley podcast. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.